Well, the first half, or more or less, well, first third to a half, actually, I didn't measure it, but maybe 30-40% of this book is about Stalin's fight for democracy, fight for the 1936 Constitution to be implemented. The 1936 Soviet Constitution called for contested elections, secret, universal, secret and contested elections for the Soviets. That is to say, at least two candidates for each position, and was never implemented. And the struggle to get the Constitution approved, led by Stalin and his supporters within the leadership, and then how that struggle was ultimately defeated is the subject of the first third, let's say, to 40% of my latest book. I know it was also the subject of an article that I published, let's say, 11 or 12 years ago. But I have updated the research and included it here as a part of this book, because it turns out that that is related also to the so-called Great Terror in interesting ways. Okay. When I said, by the way, let me just throw something out. In my view, a lot of concepts that are used rather loosely, I would say, on the left, of course also by anti-communists, but now let me just talk about some that are used on the left. A lot of concepts are insufficiently critiqued or examined or detailed, spelled out. For example, I referred to Stalin's attempt to introduce contested elections, democracy, as a desire to return all power to the Soviets. All right, that was one of the slogans of the Bolshevik Party in 1917 before they seized state power. And that's true as far as it goes, but I don't think it's entirely true. If the 1936 Constitution had been put in place along with the contested elections, Stalin said many times that he was prepared for non-communists and even anti-communists to get elected. But I'm sure they would not have permitted, for example, capitalism to have been voted back into power. All right? I don't think, therefore, that the term all power to the Soviets is really accurate. I think all power within the framework of keeping the Bolshevik Party in power, at least keeping the socialism in existence. So that slogan needs to be re-examined and discussed, and we need to figure out exactly what was meant and what we should mean by it. Another big topic that really needs to be critically examined is the concept of socialism. Just what does socialism mean? Many people say we're fighting for socialism, but what concretely does that mean? After all, Gorbachev and and Brezhnev and the other leaders of the Soviet Union all claimed to be fighting for socialism. So clearly, they were able to implement many capitalist-style changes under the guise that of fighting for socialism. So the whole concept of socialism needs to be spelled out, needs to be rethought, needs to be examined and critiqued. What did the Soviets mean by it? What did the Second International mean by it? What did the Chinese mean by it today? And what can we learn from that? What changes should be made in that concept in the future? So there are a lot of concepts that we've inherited from the old communist movement of the 20th century that need to be revisited, re-examined critically. All right? And certainly the collapse of socialism in the Soviet Union, the return to capitalism, should impel us to try to identify and trace the origins of the errors that the Bolsheviks made. Clearly, They made significant errors, very significant errors. Ultimately, the errors overcame whatever they did that was correct. And in my view, the errors go way back. All right? Khrushchev came from somewhere. Khrushchev lied, but Khrushchev came from somewhere. He was a major party leader in the 1930s. How could somebody like that get power? And many other concepts, I think, go way back. I have some views as to what they might be and how far back they might go. I won't get into that now. But I think it would be a big mistake to say, as a few people say, not too many so far, I'm glad to say that, well, if we could only get Stalin back. If only Stalin's followers had continued to his policies instead of changing them, then everything would have been all right. I don't think that could possibly